So did you know happiness is 48% genetic? Our happiness levels. I was quoting some test research last week, and it's along that same research where they did twins who were separated at birth and then reunited as adults. And regardless of what their environment was, their happiness level were sort of 48% exactly the same. And there's a ton of research out there on various ways, but there's this huge genetic component to just our normal happiness levels. And I think that's great to know, to understand just about people. You know, Jack and I were just watching a series with Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, and I've never actually fully watched basketball games except for in the early 80s, because I was living in Boston, it was this huge thing, but Magic Johnson was a Laker basketball player with the Lakers, but he's just this incredibly joyful guy, and people are like, is he making this up? Always smiling, and ultimately Larry Bird and he were enemies for so long, but become friends, and it has everything to do with this incredibly joyful personality that his parents said he came out of the womb smiling, you know, just this happy guy. We need people like that in our life, just like we need musicians, like we need good mathematicians, like we need good artists. So it's a wonderful thing to accept. We have people in our community who are very joy-filled, and it lifts everybody up. I had a mother who is very joy-filled. It's her genetics. She can't help it. You know, it doesn't mean there aren't other emotions in there. And what I found, you know, with the 4 kids, none of us are at her level of just inherent joy. But we all have a naturally joyful disposition, and I think when we're in the company of someone who is genetically very happy, it lifts everybody else up. And so I think it's something wonderful to acknowledge, and that we all have it, that we all have this joy as part of us, and we're going to continue to cultivate that this wonderful morning. So what is it that brings happiness? That's a question that a lot of people ask. I was actually surprised. Often when we have these talks, I look them up on TED Talks, and I thought, well, happiness, I thought it was going to be fairly generic. Oh my gosh, they have so much different things that are being said. I couldn't even begin to contain it all in one talk, but it was so fascinating from so many different angles. I think the one that really where I landed on was that ultimately that happiness is creating a meaningful life. That people, when we feel like we are doing something meaningful that's impacting other human beings in a positive way, no matter what it is. And they were saying in the research it didn't matter. It could be if you were doing a maintenance and really supporting the world through your maintenance work versus, I don't know, being a politician. I don't know. If you think that's supportive, I guess. But it doesn't matter what the degree is. It has nothing to do with money. It has to do with one's own sense of, I'm bringing value to the world around me. So happiness, what they've discovered, I think already, and just keep rediscovering, is that it's a byproduct. That the people who actually chase, I want to be happy, and that's their main goal. And we talked about this last week with parenting. Trying to make your child happy or have a happy life is hard. But it's a byproduct of something else. It's a byproduct of caring about something else. And so caring about the life that you are creating with your family, with your community, with your work life. What's the value that we're bringing? It's an interesting thing. When I was in the 80s in college, in my social psychology class, I remember that class so many times, so much, because it always surprised me. And one of the research that surprised me was women in the 50s had very limited choices about what they could be. And then in the 80s, they had much more, infinite almost. It's even more so now, but it was really opening up by the 80s about what our choices were. And they did, again, these happiness tests, and they found that people the women in the 1950s actually rated being happier than people in the 80s, in the 1980s. So the 1980s, they had way more choices, way more options, but people were happier in the 50s. I think if they had followed those women, what brought the women's movement is ultimately they weren't happy making those choices, but originally those limited choices was kind of an important piece, and it's important in our world today because we have so many choices, and to recognize that sometimes those very choices, by having so many, create so much stress in our life. So part of creating a life of value is learning of ourselves. To me, it's an art. I really like this word art. The art of being happy. It's the art of creating a life, the art of creating your own life, and it's really getting clear on limiting your own choices so you're not going in a million different directions. This one gentleman, a Harvard researcher, was giving a talk. Man, his name is Dan Gilbert. Highly recommend looking at some of his videos. So interesting, and he had so many studies. He was just popping them off. I can't go, but I'm sticking with the ones I remember. So they had this study where he had his students, they went out and created these two beautiful photographs. And then one group of students, they said, well, at the end, they said, you can only keep one, because the headquarters in some other place, we have to mail it off to headquarters, so you have to choose which one. Now, in one group, they were told that they had 4 days to reconsider, so they can choose one, but if they changed their mind over the next 4 days, they would contact them. And then the other group, you didn't have a choice at all. Pick one, and then they had to mail the other one to headquarters right away. So there's no room for changing their mind. And not surprisingly, with what I've been saying, it was by far the people who didn't have a choice, who picked one, were happier. They enjoyed their choice more. They were more in agreement that, yes, this was the best picture. I made the right choice. The people who had 4 days to reconsider could never get quite on the train. Well, maybe I think that was the right choice, but maybe it was that other one. They sort of fluctuated, and their sense of joy in the actual choice they made was significantly different. Isn't that amazing? And he actually had several of these. I'm not going to go through all of them, but these examples of when we have so many choices, and we know that we constantly have choices, we can change at any moment, versus just here you have, and he also pointed out when anyone had an option, like, do you want to go in the group that has a lot of choices, or do you want to go into the group that has almost no choices? Everybody wants to go into the group with a lot of choices. But they're finding that actually doesn't create a lot of happiness. It creates a lot of stress. We look at our world of all the millions of choices just going into the grocery store, the amount of choices that we have all the time ahead of us, before us. So what they found was, his point that he was making was that it's not that when there's important things to change, we want to change them. If there's health issues that you need to take care of, you take care of them. If you're in an abusive relationship, you want to leave. So you want to do things that are those big changes that are essential. But what he was saying is most of the changes that we think that we're making for the good actually turns out not to make that big a difference. They're not as significant as we think they are. So we change a relationship or change jobs. I know for me, I've moved in a lot of different places, and I've liked them all, but I don't think my level of happiness changed according to where I was living. I was who I was regardless. So what he was saying is to put that in perspective, that most of these changes that we're making, if we don't own those changes and say, this is what I've chosen, we actually have a lot of stress, no matter what the change is, even if we've just made a change for better. But if we're still all sort of thinking it should be someplace else, that I should be someplace else. Reverend David Alt wrote a book titled, I never read it, but I just love the title, "The Grass is Not Greener on the Other Side." We're always looking because there's this level of dissatisfaction. And what he was saying is that the more we own a decision and stick with it, like we stop looking in a million different directions and say, I own this, the happier we are. So a big part of happiness is acceptance. And one of the wonderful practices of acceptance is gratitude. You don't find happy people who aren't full of gratitude. People, and I'm not saying people out there, you, when you're happy, you can't help but be grateful. They just go so hand in hand. So when we're not feeling particularly happy, just to practice gratitude, just to get us back into that vibrational frequency of feeling grateful for what is, for the acceptance of what is. In our classes sometimes, we would do a gratitude circle, and what that is we would, each person, so let's say there's 8 people in the class, all 7 people would say something that they're grateful for one person, and we go around, and then so each person would hear from 7 other people about what they're grateful for them. It's so hard. I don't think anyone can stay in a bad mood after that, because suddenly the entire attention is shifted to gratitude, to what's real, and the entire vibration of the group, as well as the individuals, is completely uplifted. So gratitude is not something that we do just in November. This is a practice that we want to live constantly in our life. If you want to feel a level of joy in your life, practice that wonderful practice of gratitude. And acceptance. Acceptance is a big one. Again, because it's hard, there are so many choices, and we're always a little bit worried that we made the wrong choice, or we could have done this other thing. And I'm not saying this is true for all divorces, but I'm just saying statistically. I actually know people who have been married multiple times and are very happy in their 3rd or 4th marriage. But statistically, they found that people who got a divorce were more likely to get a divorce their 2nd marriage, and then were even more likely to get a divorce the 3rd, because they're so used to changing. Like, oh, I can do this now, I can keep changing. And so we can get lost in the idea that something is better, the grass is greener someplace else. And to say, just commit. And this is where happiness is a choice. Eventually we have to commit and say, this is what I choose. And I accept that. Because as all this research is pointing to, is when we do that, that happiness quotient gets activated. I choose to be here. It's an interesting thing, though, being on a spiritual path, especially in a community like this one. We here say we are one power, one presence, but there's as many paths as there are people. There's many names for God as there are people. There's infinite paths, infinite ways to do it, and whatever path you create is yippee. That's great. We love it, but again, that's a lot of choices. It's different than when someone says, this is my path. This is my meditation practice. We'll just use that as an example. So when I was at Agape, my minister was Reverend Michael Beckwith. I'll just call him Reverend Michael. And his primary meditation practice was mindfulness meditation, Vipassana meditation. So that's what he taught in every class, every retreat. It was Vipassana meditation. And it made it very simple and very clear. And you can go deeper and deeper on the path. Yogananda talks about the mountain. At the mountaintop is the oneness, and that's where everybody meets. He said, but if you're actually going to get up that mountaintop, you have to pick a path. You can't if you keep jumping around, you're going to keep staying at the bottom and never really get anywhere. You have to pick a path and give ourselves to it. So the question that we have more in these types of communities that are pluralistic, that allow for a lot of paths, is what is that path that I'm going to choose, recognizing that the person sitting next to me might not be choosing that same, and I'm just going to use, again, meditation because it's so clear, meditation path. That's been an interesting one for me. I haven't done a lot of my own meditation classes because my own meditation practice, I've spent a long time with individual practices, but my practice is now an integration, and this might be true for many of you, of multiple paths. I don't have, I'm just doing mindfulness meditation. I have, within one meditation period, I sort of integrate various aspects. And that's how often we do our religion. Some people really love Hinduism, Buddhism, we have religious science, we have all sorts of new thought. We have Christianity, Judaism, Islam, indigenous cultures. We have so many things that we get to pick and choose from, and everybody has these different degrees, right? So how do we know happiness? Well, one is this really owning your path. And this was a big one for me, especially when it came to meditation, because once I really got clear on what that was for me, I found that people were continuing to give me books and classes, and you should learn from this teacher. And I finally said, I'm good with where I am, because when people are constantly giving you books, there's this like little nudge, well, it's not enough. You should be doing it this way, or you haven't had this experience, or we have to own our path. That's an absolute necessity for happiness. It causes stress if you always think you should be doing something else or it's not enough. Own your path. Spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, who you are, what your relationships are, what your job is, where you want to live, wherever that you are, just own it. Unless it's, again, abusive or really bad for you. If it's really bad, we want to make changes. But own it. Own where you are right now in this moment. One of the greatest, well, we'll get to that in a minute. So in owning who we are, creating a life of value, starts to really cultivate this idea of happiness. One of the things that really helped me also with this whole idea, so we have emotions this month. The whole month, and so the first week I was talking about emotions are energy plus motion. So they move around a lot. Emotions are very active. And we were supposed to talk about fear last week, but since it was Mother's Day, Parents' Day, we didn't do that. But next week is anger. So I think they threw in happiness this week just to lighten the load a little. But there is actually a difference, and we have to become clear on it. So there's a million definitions as I'm looking around with feelings and emotions and how it relates to beliefs. But the one that really helped me, and I don't know if it's out there on Google because I learned it from Reverend Michael, and I don't know where he got it from, but he would differentiate between feelings and emotions. Emotions come and go. They're moving. They're emotional. Feelings are solid. They are of God. They are eternal. They don't come and they don't go. So joy is a feeling when we connect with spirit that doesn't come and go. It is not based on conditions. It's not based on anything external. It's not based on genetics. It is in, through, and as every person who can hear my voice, all beings on this planet are made in the image and likeness of pure joy, of peace that passes human understanding, of love. And we don't create that. We are that, and we acknowledge what is already there. That's very significant because the other emotions that we're talking about this month, like fear and anger, those are temporary. Those are on the human plane. They are moving. They often are here to teach us something or to guide us, but they are not eternal, and they don't have lasting power in our life. But happiness is connected to that deep, abiding joy that is ever present. That is of God, and that is eternal. So there is a power to this that is transcendent of all the other emotions. So feelings are transcendent of emotions. Does that make sense? So we're connecting with happiness is taking us into that deeper place of joy. When I do any type of meditation, whether it's mindfulness meditation or Zen meditation, connecting with that which is ever present, which is greater than emotion. And this is why connecting with spirit is so important. If I had any ultimate message that I would want to if I were to leave tomorrow, the planet, I don't know, I guess when you have an aneurysm, you think of that sometimes. Oh, it could just happen any minute. The one thing that I would say is put God first, because God is the source of everything. This divine presence, this spirit is the source of everything we experience on this earth. And everything of this, all the experiences and conditions and the feelings and the emotions that are happening are all arising out of this thing that is so joyful, that is so full of love, that is the healing presence of everything, that if we begin our days with that, when you wake up, I hope everybody begins with connecting with that divine presence within you, whatever way that looks for you, whether it's meditation, whether it's prayer, you are connecting first and foremost with that transcendent place in some form before you start the day, because that is the source of your day. That literally is, what's that song? this is the day that God, something about this is the day the Lord's made, and we rejoice in it. You know, you remember? We've sung it here before, but it's the idea that we're rejoicing because this day is made in God. It is made as God's day. And we don't know that if we don't connect with it. That's just a concept, but we need to connect with that. And so if I would say that's the most important thing that we can do with our life. And that's what meditation brings, is joy. For some reason, when I do Zen, I just get in a place of joy. Like everything drops away. I know for people, I was talking about a group, and Beth Stiles was doing a lot of mindfulness meditation, and the whole class was just in this state of joy at the end. When we connect with Spirit, you will be in a state of joy. Even when you don't think you've connected with Spirit because you didn't meditate right, just that intention, the intentions like you started at the beginning of the service, just that intention is activating something that is greater and stronger than you are. We have less power than we think we do. But when we align with Spirit, that is the power. And there is something that responds that says, yes, when we say this is my intention, whether I'm able to do it or not, just the fact that I've sat down in meditation, it takes action, or sat down in prayer, just the fact that I've been willing to take action, that activates something that's greater than anything I can of myself create. And that's when we start activating a joy that's beyond what we can ever humanly imagine, and that is accessible to all beings everywhere. I just happened to catch this documentary on Gary Shandling. Are you familiar with him, the comedian? And he's sort of very self-deprecating and I think very funny. And he passed away a few years ago, and Judd Apatow did a documentary on him. And I only caught the end of it, but it pulled me in. I hadn't meant to watch it, but I was so taken. You could feel, it had an energy to it, the documentary. And apparently, I missed the beginning of it, but apparently he had a very rough life, as we know many comedians do. That he had a lot of struggles, and so he made humor out of it. What's so interesting is that he really gave his life, he became a Buddhist. He was born Jewish and became Buddhist and had a 35-year meditation practice. And Jerry Seinfeld also has had a lifelong meditation practice. He does TM. Jim Carrey, as many of you may know, does, I think, mindfulness meditation. He has a strong meditation practice. And I was just thinking, wow, this is so amazing how many comedians have meditation practices and also are known to having difficult lives. Because what I feel is that even though their lives were difficult, they touched into that thing within them that was so full of joy regardless of the circumstances, and they felt the power of that joy. They know that it's there. And that's what brought them to meditation, is like, I know the source of this joy, and it didn't come from my family or an environment, but I can create humor, I can laugh. I remember when I was at Agape, I was there at a very stressful time. They had been kicked out of one building, and this is a community of thousands, so you can't. Nothing's easy. So the lease ran up, so they were renting hotel rooms. So if you wanted to know where the service was, you had to call a line because it was different every week. It was the traveling thing, and we were paying rent on the old building. I can't remember how it all worked, and we had leased a new building, but it needed all this construction. So it was way more money than they had. 3 different places they're trying to keep going. The staff, people had been on the staff for a really long time, for years, and they hadn't had a raise in years, and they were upset about that. There was just this general sense of upset. And Reverend Michael, who's running it all, he's getting requests to leave and go be a guest speaker, and he's like, man, I could just let this all go. This is a lot of chaos and stress, and everyone was feeling it. And yet, when we would go into a staff meeting, Reverend Michael would come in, and he'd just start cracking jokes. He was so funny. In the midst of what the intensity of, can't pay bills, can't pay the construction workers, can't pay the staff what they need to be staffed, have to hold paychecks. it was just chaos. And yet, in the midst of that, and I don't think he was trying, but he was so connected with this ever-present light that it didn't own him. This world did not own him. The circumstances, even though it was his life, it's not like it was happening to someone else. It was happening in his world. This has been his whole world, and it seems to be in total chaos. Connection. That's how powerful it is. No matter what we're going through, that's what comedians find, and they say that people who laugh more live longer, and comedians tend to live pretty long because they find the humor, the lightness of being in the midst of life. And we all need that, but we can't find that unless we find the joy. And what all of this is about relationship. That the people who are truly the happiest are in relationship with whatever that looks like. But if you're in relationship with the universe, with God itself, then you are in relationship with everything. Nature, plants, the people in your life, animals. That there's this deep connection that we feel, and more deeply we feel connected with other life, with the life form inwardly. We have the inner connection and then the outer connection, but it starts with that inner connection. The more we feel connected, the happier that joy is. The freer we feel, the lighter we feel. We need each other. We need to feel the divine presence in each other. And that brings so much joy. People who are part of communities, I was going to bring it, but I forgot it. There was a funny thing in the Unity magazine years ago about how unsafe the world is, but none of these happen when you're sitting in a Unity service. The safest place to be is right here. The healthiest, the place to be with people are connecting in spirit. And when we're in a spiritual community, to be able to do that with the people here, and then knowing that this has no walls, that it continues, that it's global, that it goes out to your neighbors, there's no limit to this connection. And that creates this incredible happy life. Again, happiness as a byproduct, not as the source. So if you're happy, it means that you have felt that you've created a life that has meaning. And if you're not feeling very happy, then it's a play, well, how can I create a little bit more meaning in this area of my life? Just generating that meaning. Where can I accept my life a little bit more and stop fighting it? Just say, this is what I've chosen, and I accept it, and I'm fully engaged in it. And if it's intolerable, then I change that. But otherwise, really practice being happy with what I have and stop looking at all the thousands of choices. If you go into the grocery store, we're all experts now. We don't go through all the brands. We know what we want, right? When we go into the grocery store in general, you go and get the things that you want. You don't look at everything. That's your life. Your work, what work you're doing, your relationships. Be with what you have. Give yourselves to them. Be grateful. The acceptance is be grateful for what we have, and most importantly, stay connected. Stay connected with the divine source, and stay connected with everybody. And then you have the happy life. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. So this week, my invitation is to accept your life. Look at the places where you're not accepting, where you might be thinking that there's something better on the other side. Accept where you are, accept your choices. See that you have a life of meaning just as it is. Show up for it and connect. Put God first in your life every day. Wake up, that's the most important thing. And allow that relationship, that connection, whether it's through meditation or prayer, and let it permeate your day. And then we live that eternal happy life that doesn't come and go, but that is sustained regardless of conditions and circumstances and genetics. All right, so let's pray. I was trying to sing at the beginning of prayers, but if you're happy and you know, it doesn't really work great with beginning a prayer, so I think I'll just speak a prayer today.
It's your happy place. Put God first, and you know it. And that's your happy place.
Yes, it is. That is our happy place, and how grateful, grateful, grateful that we get to enter into that happy place right here and right now, and that this happy place is available to us, this deep abiding joy, this delight that created the universe. It is the relationship of all life. It is pure being. It is a feeling that doesn't come and doesn't go. And so I invite us now just to breathe into this awareness that each and every one of us is made in the image and likeness of pure joy. We are each made in the image and likeness of pure, unlimited joy. We are made in the image and likeness of pure, unlimited joy. And nothing of this world can ever touch it. It is always joyful, and it is always joyful in the center of our being. It is there to lift us up during those challenging times, and it is there to celebrate with us during those joyful times, and is there just to feel the power and the joy of just everyday living, of moving through and as our wonderful days, the tasks that need to be done, the interactions that happen with family, with friends, with community, with colleagues, with employers and clients. Joy just permeates everything that we are doing, not because we are making it happen, but it is already there, and we are simply seeing that which already exists. It is already there. It is there before we arrive. It greets us. It meets us and welcomes us into each and every moment. We arrive into that moment expecting and opening our hearts to this incredible, joyful reception of pure spirit. And knowing that we are the givers of this joy, even as we receive, we give more than we can possibly imagine. We outpicture this radiant light, this radiant joy, pouring from every atom and cell of our beingness. We are joy itself, and everywhere we go, we uplift people. Even as we have been uplifted, we allow ourselves to uplift others in joy, in light, and in love. And so I call forth now all those people in our community who are going through challenges, who are going through shifts and changes, that don't feel joyful, that feel, whether it's health challenges that we have, that people are healing, emotional and physical health, mental health, financial challenges, people are changing locations of living, relationship changes, work changes, all these different changes that might create upheaval and challenges. And we surround them and know that this presence of light and love is guiding them and directing them. It's not asking us to feel laughter in the midst of pain, but it is allowing us to create space with this joy. And that space is what's helping us heal into our greater yet to be in every area of our life. That this joy is calling us home, and sometimes it doesn't look pleasant, and yet we absolutely stand in this truth that this eternal joy, this eternal light, is the thing that is calling us into our greater yet to be. It is calling us. Are we answering? It is calling us. Joy is calling you. Joy is calling all of us. Joy is calling this planet into its greater yet to be. We are not here to suffer. We are here to grow in light and in joy and in love. How grateful I am for our answer and for our willingness to be this answer, to be this joy, to claim it, to own it, and to accept it, and to be deeply and profoundly grateful for it here and now. And in this gratitude, we just say thank you, thank you, thank you, God. And we let this word be now as we say together, and so it is. Amen.